Thank you for listening to Upaya's Dharma podcasts, an extraordinary series of talks from some of the finest Buddhist teachers in the world. I'm Joan Halifax, founder of Upaya Zen Center, and we're so happy to make these podcasts available to you. If you find this talk of benefit, please consider making a donation to support us to continue offering these recordings freely. You'll find a donation button on our podcast page. And thank you so much for listening.
This is Dharma Podcast at dharmapodcast.org. This is show number 705. It was recorded on September 26th, 2012, and it is titled, You Can't Always Get What You Want, Though you might find you get what you need. The speaker for this episode is Sean Murphy.
Hi everyone, thank you for coming out. How many people were here for the last talk I gave a few months ago? Thank you. Which was called I Can't Get No Satisfaction. Okay. So we're doing the Rolling Stone series of Dharma talks. This work that I want to share with you, or this approach to practice, it comes out of my own practice, but it also comes out of maybe 5 or 6 years now teaching university students meditation in a completely secular setting. So, I'm kind of having to translate my Zen practice to people who are very, very interested, but would kind of be scared off by the trappings of Zen, and would be maybe mistrustful of college students, maybe mistrustful of anything that smacks of authority and hierarchy and all these things. So it's been an interesting process to kind of retranslate what I know from Zen practice, from formal Zen practice, which has been very rich for me, and to present it without some of the doctrine and other things that start to adhere to it. The other place that this comes from is a book I wrote called One Bird, One Stone, which is a collection of Western Zen stories, American Zen stories. And I traveled all over the country interviewing Zen teachers and senior practitioners. And that was very illuminating because I was exposed to just a really wide array of ways of approaching this practice. And if we're accustomed to coming to one center, or just a couple of centers, we can think it's just done in a certain way, and we don't quite realize the full range of approaches. So that's also really helped me adapt what I do for my teaching at university level. Just curious, how many people have a regular meditation practice of some sort? Okay. Since we've just been sitting, before we get too much into talking, I'd like us to just sit for a minute and plug back into that state of mind, to whatever practice you're accustomed to doing. So I imagine a lot of you are working with the breath as your primary focus. Some of you may be doing just sitting practice, what we call just sitting practice in Zen or Shikantaza practice. I'd like to give a couple suggestions that point us more in that direction. So without disrupting what we're doing, how many people, can you just raise a hand or a finger, how many people can feel a certain palpable sense of stillness? So for those of you who feel that sense of stillness in the room or in the space, I'd like to invite you to just sink into that and allow that to be your object of meditation. So if you're focusing on the breath or something else, the breath just comes and goes. For those of us who feel we're still settling in, there's no right or wrong here. I'd like you to just kind of cast around and see if between the thoughts or distractions, there might be an empty space. Actually, you'll find there's an empty space between thoughts. The mind may seem to be filled sometimes with thoughts and distractions, but if you look closely, you'll actually see that there's spaces between the thoughts or distractions, that they're not actually continuous. And if you choose to, you can put your attention in that space between the thoughts rather than upon the thoughts or distractions. So it's as though when we sit down, there's usually busyness in our minds. But what we don't actually realize is that in generating and interacting with the thoughts and busyness, that we're actually doing something. So from this ground of stillness, I'd like you to notice that it actually takes effort to reach after a distraction or a thought. Just look for a minute or two and see if that isn't true. And that there's kind of a non-doing mind you can rest in, which also, it takes a certain small effort to rest there. Choosing to rest in that mind is a bit like choosing to relax a muscle or to keep a muscle relaxed. When the muscle wants to start tensing up, we try and remain in the relaxation. So we can't relax a muscle by clutching after it or saying, relax muscle, relax. In a pointed way, we have to kind of sink into it, become aware of it, and allow it to happen. So the same approach can work for the mind of meditation. We allow ourselves to sink into it. So that the meditative mind becomes a bit like a warm bath. It's important to notice that it's pleasant and to let yourself enjoy that pleasantness. Notice that the mind may want to imagine that there's some greater pleasure. So it may want to reach after that, but that's a kind of doing. In Zen meditation practice, particularly in just sitting, we don't do. It's a non-doing state. We choose just to remain in being, just in awareness. So if that mind is a bit like a warm bath, the thoughts are a bit like a ringing telephone. Sure, you can get out of the bath and answer the telephone, but you'll be cold and you'll drip all over the floor and you might electrocute yourself on the phone, and it'll be a call you don't want to receive anyway from an 800 number. So you can just let the phone ring and pick up the message later. So before we begin talking in a minute, the last thing is I'd like you to notice, because I'm going to ask you a few questions about the qualities of this mind of stillness or silence. So see if you can notice what it's like. So I'm going to rack this by starting to talk and ask questions, but if you're enjoying the sitting, it's entirely possible to rest in this stillness even while listening and even while interacting a bit. So I invite you to do that. One of the things that I've noticed through dealing with many people who meditate is many times we learn a technique like following the breath. And that technique, after a time, can become entrapping. So if we find ourselves sinking into that stillness, but keep reaching out of it to latch on to following the breath, that's actually just more doing. So it's actually leading us away from it. So whatever technique we use to get into the meditative mind state can be very useful. But at a certain point, we have to know when to let it go and just rest in that open mind. So that resting in the open mind is what we call in Zen practice just sitting or shikantaza. In other traditions, it's sometimes called meditation without an object, or meditation on awareness itself. So we're just aware, and whatever comes and goes. Sure, the breath is there, sensations in the body are there, thoughts and feelings may rise and fall, but we're just resting in the open space that surrounds all that. So how many people can feel like you can at least get a little glimpse of that space, or feel that space? Okay, good. So, my last talk, I'm just going to review a little bit, was I can't get no satisfaction. And it occurred to me that that's a pretty good statement of what's called in Buddhism the first noble truth, which is sometimes translated as life is suffering. But I have some trouble with that translation because that feels kind of heavy to us, and people resist it and have trouble with that. And it seems to be like, well, let's just say it's a translation, and the translation is somewhat faulty. What it really means is that it really means I can't get no satisfaction. It means that how many people feel sometimes like life ain't like it ought to be exactly? Like it should have somehow be better, like we're a little dissatisfied, like it feels out of kilter, like we can't quite get settled. Like it's always going to be better next week, right? Isn't it always going to be better next week just after I get through this push? And then what happens next week? It's the same, right? Right after I get through this push. And then maybe we get a little open spell. but then it's back to that again. So that kind of mind of wanting it to be better or feeling a sense of lack or dissatisfaction and wanting to reach for satisfaction keeps arising, doesn't it? Yeah. Why is that? Anybody know? Any conjectures on what causes that? Disconnection, that's one of the things, okay. So when we feel separate, we feel like we have to reach for something to complete us. So disconnection, right? So that can be a tub of Haagen-Dazs, it can be a drink, it can be another person, it can be money, it can be a career, it can be a house, car, the list, an iPod, the list goes on, right? And in Zen, that's one good answer. In Zen, we always point to the problem of separation, that we feel fundamentally separate. Now, if we are really I don't deny that we all at times feel fundamentally separate and disconnected, but if we are fundamentally separate, then we should be able to remove ourselves or something from. If we're really autonomous, we should be able to remove ourselves from our environment, right? So, can anybody do that? Remove themselves or anything from the environment, from their environment? No, I mean, you could walk out of the room, but there's another environment there, and then you walk out into the world and there's another environment there. Somehow, because we're portable, we think we're separate. Because we can move around in our environment, we think we're separate. But we can't separate ourselves from our environment. In fact, we can't take one thing out of the universe. All we can do is change its form. We could burn this, but then we'd have ash and energy, right, and heat and light. And then that would go. That wouldn't be lost either. You had a...
Oh, I was just saying we're just simply not autonomous.
We're not autonomous, yeah. Yeah, so one of the basic causes of that suffering or dissatisfaction is because we tend to think of ourselves as fundamentally separate or autonomous. And therefore, somehow needing to make ourselves safer or more comfortable or something like that. So anybody else want to say what causes that feeling of dissatisfaction? Yes? The media, okay.
We're constantly told that we are entitled to everything that will make us happy.
Okay. Okay, so we're entitled to everything that will make us happy. So what I find embedded in that is what's often described as the second noble truth that suffering's caused by craving, right? It's caused by clutching or reaching for things, clutching or reaching for something. That doesn't mean just basic desire is wrong. Basic desire is natural. But it's how many people have ever been a parent or been a child? Okay, so anybody who's ever been a parent or been a child probably has experienced at some moment the quality of parental love between a parent and a child, and that a clutching quality can come into that, where we're trying to control that love, right? How many people know what I'm talking about? Okay, yeah. Even people who are really good parents play with that edge sometimes, right? You're trying to shape and help this person, and sometimes you overdo, right? So that's what's meant by clutching or grasping. It doesn't mean that your desire for the other person to do well is a problem, or that your love for the other person is a problem, but the desire to clutch or make it different. And you just were saying that we're constantly... we're told more or less that we're entitled to have things that will make us happy. But embedded in there is the idea that things will make us happy, that some other situation or some other thing will create the happiness that we feel we lack, right? So now I want to get to this part 2 of the talk, which is you can't always get what you want, but you may find you get what you need. Okay, when you were in that feeling of that stillness of mind, even if it only came for a moment. Now, I know sometimes we'll come in here, and I don't want anybody to feel bad if you didn't connect with it this time. But many people come to a place like this, or they come to a practice like meditation, because we connect with that feeling of stillness. So what are some of the qualities of that feeling of stillness? Other than stillness. Okay, in the back there. Okay, it's in some sense energizing or invigorating. Okay. Yeah. Spacious. Okay.
Sense of ease.
Ease. Okay.
Nothing's missing.
Nothing's missing. Okay. Nothing's missing. She's my shill in the audience. You know what a shill is? You put somebody in the audience and you're waiting for them to ask the right question or give the right answer. But she's not really a shill. Somebody always happens on the right, on the answer I was looking for specifically. All these answers are correct. But yeah, there's nothing missing. What were you going to say? Peaceful. Okay. Yeah. So in that spacious state of mind where we're resting in awareness itself, is it true that how many people know what she means when she says nothing's missing, when you touch that? Okay. So outside of meditation, how many people have experienced some time in their life when they felt satisfied? Really satisfied? Okay. When was that? Anybody want to say? Yeah, when was yours?
I was in a new living situation and I had a roommate who said I could stay in my room and hide there if I wanted, or I could come out and inhabit the space if I wanted. But all of those options and anything.
Okay, great. So isn't that wonderful when that happens, when we just hit the perfect moment of the perfect, set of circumstances and situations? Anybody else, when did you feel satisfied? Giving birth, okay, all right, good, okay. That's interesting too, okay. Who else? Anyone else? Yeah. Okay, you felt satisfied, yeah, okay, all right. Who else? Winter Wonderland, okay. Yeah.
I was in the ER and I'd just been told that I had a tumor on my pancreas. And I had an incredible sense of peace a couple hours later. And I was like, it's going to be amazing. There's nothing to be afraid of. Have I been able to hang on to that? No.
Yeah.
I didn't forget it.
Okay. Okay, so she's my shill too. What's the second part of what she said? Yeah, has she been able to hang on to it, right? Okay. So what causes our sense of dissatisfaction in this moment is often what? Comparing it to a moment that we remember that seems like it was better than this one, right? Okay. So that means what? So does that mean, who's doing the dissatisfaction then? We are, right? Yeah, we're doing the dissatisfaction, right? Because we choose to compare this moment to another moment that might have been better. Or even we just imagine a moment that maybe we've never had that might be better. So, or we identify with the past moment. But if we really look, how many people felt moments of satisfaction in childhood? And how many people have often felt that some of that magic has gone away? Okay. Only 3 or 4? No, more than that. Okay. It's almost a universal adult experience that sometimes that feeling of magic goes away. So what does the child mind have that we don't have? Okay. Good. Okay. And in the back?
A lack of expectation.
Okay. Yeah, what they have is actually something that they don't have. They don't have expectations. They're not doing this thing of comparing the past to the future, and wishing that the past moment that was, they're not, obviously as a child develops, I'm not saying a child's an enlightened being. As a child develops, they learn all these things. They learn to latch onto the past. They learn to worry about the future. But up to a certain point, they're mostly rooted in the present, right? Animals are, right? Anybody ever see an unhappy chipmunk? Really, seriously, I've seen them in the mouths of cats. Okay, but that means they're in a present moment that's bad. Okay, but when there's not a present moment that's bad, they're generally happy, right? Most animals are like that, and a kid who's got what they need is mostly like that. Am I right? Am I right? So that means another way of saying that is that kid is satisfied, right? They're satisfied. Okay, when a kid hurts themselves, they cry, right? But you don't find a 4-year-old kid, once it stops hurting, saying to themselves, life is an endless succession of skinned knees. I skinned my knee yesterday. I'll skin it tomorrow. I'll skin it the next day. I'll skin it the day after that. Why bother? There's nothing but skinned knees, and it probably gets worse from here. And why even go on, right? You just don't see them thinking like that, right? So this is not to say that it's not appropriate to think about the future and to learn from the past. That's a basic characteristic that makes us human, right? The problem is that tends to start taking over. Tends to start taking over. So we're always thinking about manipulating our life so that the next moment is going to come out the way we want it to be, right? And our society is completely geared towards that. So it's really, really hard to resist. It's really, really hard to resist it. That next thing we're saving for that we're going to get, or when we get out of debt, or or when we get that house, or when. And there's this treadmill that we never seem to get there. How come we never seem to get there? Okay, so he's right. So what's another way of saying that? There's no place to go. Why don't we never get there? Because we're there. Aren't we there? All right, are we here? Okay. So can everybody feel that this moment is real? Or as real as it gets? Okay. I know we could quibble philosophically with how real anything is, but okay. Out of the range of normal human experience, we know that we're here at this moment, don't we? More than we know anything else, right? The future is definitely a fabrication, isn't it? Would anybody quibble with that? I mean, you could quibble again with it philosophically, but for instance, there was just a big tsunami in Japan, right? All the people who were caught in that tsunami were riding around just like we do, in their cars and going around. They were thinking about the next thing they were going to do, right? Did the next moment come? It ended, right? That could happen at any time, right? So all those mental fabrications that seem so real, for instance, my mental fabrication is I think there's going to be a Sean who lives into his 80s, because that's how long my grandfather lived, right? I'm 55 now, so that means I think I have Sean that's extending for almost 30 more years. It's kind of a burden. Anyway, I need to plan for that Sean-ness that may occur in the future, but can we say that that's got a kind of provisional reality that's not as real as this one? It's not as real as this one, right? We're sure we're here, aren't we? We're pretty sure we're here within the range of human experience. We're pretty sure we're sitting here. Okay, same thing with the past, right? So I was born in 1957. Nobody remembers that day. My mother doesn't even remember it because she was unconscious. She was, gassed or whatever they did. The total anesthetic. So nobody really remembers that day, So somewhere in my mind, I think it happened, but in a certain way, it's theoretical, right? Even if I could get the nurses and doctors back who remember that day doesn't exist now, does it? That day was real then. It was real then. Tomorrow will be real when it happens, but neither of them are real now, right? So in this moment, let's just sink back into that for a minute. So let's again notice that sense of stillness. Now I know we've just agitated our minds. It might be a little trickier to find. One way to watch for it is that it's the thing behind everything else. That mind. It's the thing in our awareness that isn't actually doing anything. It's kind of, in a way, it's the fundamental field of experience. That awareness is what allows us to drive a car or to go to the store or do anything we do. However, we usually pay attention to the thing that arises in the awareness. We don't usually pay attention to the awareness itself. So another way to locate it is it's analogous to the silence that surrounds sound. So we hear how sounds come out of silence and fall back into silence. But the silence is always waiting, right? So our mind of awareness is like that. Our basic mind of awareness is like that. Things rise and fall, appear and disappear. But the awareness is the field in which it all happens. So we begin often entering a meditative state by taking a single object of awareness, like the breath, or some people use a mantra, or some people use another method. But really the destination is sinking into the awareness itself. So just so we get this a little better, I want us to wreck it by bringing to mind a problem. You're not really wrecking it because nothing wrecks the field of awareness. We can temporarily seem to disrupt it by bringing to mind a problem or a desire or an aversion, something we wish was different. Now, some of you may be having the experience I'm having, which is it feels so good to just be in awareness that the mind won't fasten on a problem. But I think perhaps you see what I'm pointing to, that when we bring a problem, which often has to do with past or future, right? It happens to be, oftentimes it's projecting something that happened from the past into the future. It often involves grasping or wanting to control or wanting it to be different, right? Maybe it always involves that. So one side of grasping is wanting something, clutching at it. The other side of it, which amounts to the same thing, is pushing it away. I don't know, does anyone have a problem that doesn't involve grasping or pushing away, or the past or the future? I don't know, isn't the nature of a problem that we want it to be different? Isn't that the nature of a problem? Okay, so I'm really sorry, but wanting it to be different is the problem. Which isn't to say that we don't make positive effort for the good, which is something Katagiri Roshi always used to say. However, what tends to happen is we collapse into that positive effort for the good so that all our effort goes into creating some future good that we somehow, it becomes like a treadmill, right? So when we were just resting in the present moment, how many people had trouble bringing to mind a problem or didn't want to bring to mind a problem? Or how many people noticed that when you were really resting in the present moment, you couldn't find a problem? Okay, right? Okay. So what I'm pointing to here is that when we rest in what's real, which is what's happening in the present moment, what we're aware of in the present moment, right? I pointed to the present moment, I pointed to awareness. Okay? Not the stuff that comes into awareness that we want or don't want. Awareness itself, okay? That when we're in that, life isn't so difficult. I mean, probably there's a few people in here who are experiencing physical pain, or maybe you're hating what I'm saying, or maybe you're bored or angry. But so those things are like things that arise in the moment, just like the child's skin knee, right? Okay. But in general, I'd be willing to bet that if you look at most moments in which something like that isn't happening, most moments something bad isn't happening. Okay? What does it take to make a bad day? How many bad events? He says one. How many?
One that you hang on to.
One that you hang on to. Maybe, maybe two, maybe three. Maybe, but, so are most of the, even in your, picture a really bad day, are most of the moments in that day bad? No. No, most of the moments in that day aren't bad. So what's happening is we're latching on to those moments and we're holding on to them even after they're past. And oftentimes we're projecting that it's just going to get worse in the future. Isn't that so? So the things that we pointed to that were satisfying, like this gentleman's hike, he probably was just enjoying nature, right? You're just enjoying what's under your feet moment to moment. Many people have that experience in nature. Many people have that experience when they're doing something that they love. In fact, I think most people gravitate towards something that gives them that experience. How many people have something in their life that gives them that experience of forgetting all about their problems? Okay, yeah. So in meditation practice, we try and take that quality of mind that we all know. See, it's not something esoteric and distant. If you have something in your life that brings you to that focus and allows you to forget yourself and your problems, then you already know how to do it. What you don't know is how to do it when you're outside the field of the thing that you love, okay? We tend to know how to do this when we're making music or dancing or skiing or making art or making love or whatever the thing is that brings us to that point where we forget ourselves. Another way to say it is we forget ourselves. It brings us to that moment of satisfaction. But what we often don't realize is that it's not specifically the thing. It's not dependent on the thing. What brings us the satisfaction is that we enter completely into the moment and forget ourselves. So meditation and its cousin mindfulness, our practice is to bring us back to that moment, even if it's a moment that's not ecstatic or that's neutral, or even if it's a moment that, sometimes that is unpleasant. If you're really, really practicing, you just bring that mind to your whole experience. So if we can agree that the present moment is reality, then meditation is the practice of bringing our minds in accord with reality and noticing when we're not in reality. Now, sometimes we have to not be in reality when we're deciding what college to go to, or whether we should buy that house or not, or whether we should date this person or not, or whether our child should go to this school or not, or what we should do about a certain issue. Nobody's saying that we shouldn't look at those things, but it's possible to look at those things and to understand that in those moments when we're projecting into the future, we're framing reality. We're using kind of a program of the mind that allows us to frame and conceptualize reality. It's really useful. It's really useful, for instance, if you're going to go and get something to eat afterwards, you'll have to, somehow project, and you'll have to somehow make decisions that take us into the future. Or a better example is winter's coming, so we know we have to get firewood in, or whatever. We have to get our gas tank filled, or we have to, whatever we have to do to make sure that we're going to be warm this winter, right? That's appropriate use of projecting into the future. But when we think about how we're going to get through this winter and stay warm, that's conceptualizing reality. It's not reality itself, right? When January comes and we're either cold or warm, then it's real. But right now, January is not real. We have to plan for it, but the problem comes when we mistake it as reality, okay? Once we start to mistake the future as having the same level of reality as the present, then we're in trouble, because then we can't get no satisfaction, right? But the Rolling Stones had it all down. You can't always get what you want, okay? So many times we're projecting into the future, and how many people have ever worried about something that never came to pass? Okay, everybody, right, okay. How many people ever thought they really, really wanted something and it turned out to be better that they didn't get it? Okay. How many people had something happen to them that they thought was going to be a tragedy, but it turned out to be a good thing? Okay. So the future is always skittering away from us, right? When we think, so when we're reaching after what we want, we're trying to control it. But actually, satisfaction, true satisfaction, comes when we're with the moment that's rising under our feet. So there's never a place to reach for where we're going to find that, because the only place we're going to find it is here. Didn't we all just experience that in sitting? Or didn't many of us experience it in sitting? Or if you didn't experience it, is it possible that you could see that it might be possible to experience it in sitting? Okay. So that's where what would it be like if just our experience moment to moment was enough? Yeah, what would it be like if our experience moment to moment was enough? Okay, that doesn't mean we can't buy a new house or plan for, our retirement or something, but it just means we don't collapse into that and start mistaking that for reality, because it isn't, Yeah, set up your, what are they called? 401ks, yeah. Set up your 401k and then forget about it, then return to the present moment, okay? So we're coming to the end of our time together, but I just want to remind us that when we sit down to practice, or when we're walking around in our life, when we want to practice mindfulness, which is the same thing, it's carrying. In fact, meditation doesn't really function unless you carry it out of your meditation practice and into your life. So let me ask you on the review, what things did we just point to help you find that field of, that's the meditative mind? What are like two things? Where do you look for it? Okay, it's not, none of that's wrong, but more precise, where do you look for it? Yeah, where do you look for the stillness? Where is it always to be found? The only place you can ever find it is in the present moment, okay? That's not to say every present moment is going to be still, but that's the only place you're ever going to find it, right? You're never going to find enlightenment next week. If you find it next week, when it happens, it'll be now. It'll just be a different now, right? Okay. So it's always in the present moment. And also, what did I say about awareness? What's the mind? What do we normally focus on using our awareness? The objects of awareness, the things that arise in awareness, right? So the thing we're doing with our awareness, right? We wouldn't be able to drive a car if we weren't aware, right? But in meditation, we're not looking at the object of awareness. We're looking at the mind itself. We're looking at awareness itself, okay? At least that's the entry to it. There's more and more subtle levels to find, right? But ultimately, I meet many people who've been practicing for 20 years, and they're just so fastened on that object of meditation. It's like, that's meant to get you to the mind of meditation. When you get there, you don't need the object. If you start thinking about something, you need something to focus on again, pick up the object again. But that mind of stillness and awareness and presence, that's the mind that you're looking for. It's also the mind we were born with. Because before we learned words, before we learned about past and future, before we learned about separation, when we were babies, when we were infants, we didn't know separation, we didn't know past, we didn't know future. We weren't worrying. When we were suffering, we were suffering. When we weren't suffering, right? So this is a mind we all know. We know it. We tend to know it in our present lives when we're really absorbed in something. And we were born into it before we learned about past and future and learned to worry. What's happening outside? Is there a bear or something? 5 deer. 5 deer. Wow, okay. Well, forget what I'm saying. Enjoy the deer. Okay, thank you all.